Hello. Hello.
Happy Sunday.
Mm, mm. Good to see you. Mm. Might take the time to see everyone here if you have the inclination. Oh, mm, mm.
Of course, we're hoping you're all well. I'm looking forward to sitting together today. Getting over a little cold, so uh, apologies for any coughing and grunting within the instruction. So let's sit together for a little while. Mm. As always, taking your time to settle into a relatively comfortable seated posture. Of course, we understand there may be conditions in the body or in our lives that perhaps suggest a lying posture or standing posture may be more supportive. Of course, we always encourage practice in any human posture that we're capable of. And as we come to let our eyes close or soften, of course, we recognize there is something about the seated posture that is a unique balance where there is stillness, more or less, compared to walking or moving around. Um, Uprightness doesn't incline so clearly towards, so habitually, perhaps, towards sleep, though of course we can get sleepy, nor how the standing posture sometimes can keep us from really relaxing on a deep level because of our need to maintain balance. So we have this compromise between all of these postures in the seated position. can still be sleepy, can still be agitated. But there is some built-in invitation toward a balance, an ability to explore these extremes that will arise with some groundedness and stability and rest, as well as uprightness, alertness, energy. Even though we close the eyes to help contain, simplify the realms of experience that we're training the attention to be with, it's important to remember that nothing that can happen is outside of the realm of mindfulness, interest, exploration, whether it's what we want to be happening or not. All mental, emotional phenomena, visual experience, sound, smell, taste, all the physical sensations that can happen throughout the body, on the surface and internally. Any phenomena can be an appropriate object of our contemplation, attention, exploration, interest. And since this stream of life is unfolding moment by moment, all of these sense stores, task is very simple. To try to simply observe moment to moment change in the body, in the mind, all of the sense stores. Develop our ability to see the truth of this change, its uncontrollability. The mind's incredible capacity to be at peace, be caring, no matter what's happening, and to be interested in the mind's resistance to change, all of the ways that it tries to protect and defend itself from what it doesn't want, preserve what it likes, find comfort and control, be patient, compassionate with the heart, mind that clings, that rejects. Using these truths to feel what it means to care about the heart that is in turmoil, the body in pain. Feel the goodness of that care and bolstered by the beauty of that connection when we can. So we bring the attention into the body, receiving this wide range of sensations throughout: pressure, tingling, hardness, softness, coolness, warmth, moisture, dryness. And try to maintain that connection moment by moment, arising and passing, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. The mind that's observing just as changeable. There may be times where it's appropriate to open the attention to the field of sound, or narrow it to where the hands are touching, or the area of the abdomen, where the breath is causing this rising and falling motion. The mind will wander and become distracted, ruminate on other things. So we watch, find interest in that tendency. And what is it like to renounce these constructed securities? Find our faith in the heart's ability to be with unmanipulated reality, body, sound, coming and going. All concentration, all mindfulness can be seen as an act of renunciation, an act of faith. When that faith is not there, we notice it. We notice the mind clinging, patterns, security, care for it, compassion, beautiful to offer and receive. And slowly, gently, we let go again, again and again. these platforms, these structures of self preoccupation. And find for a moment this faith. The mind can feel safe in the truth and what's actually happening in our direct experience without control and manipulation. Plenty of care, patience, and determination. So we have some time again today. If anyone has any questions that we might be able to support with, questions about your practice, questions about instructions, questions about questions, the best way to let us know at the bottom of your Zoom screen. My God, it's not there for me right now. Okay, now it is. There's a button that says raise hand. You can click on that. If you don't see that or can't work, there's a chat button. You can type into me that you have a question. You can call on you, or you can wave your physical hand and we'll see that you have a question. Only easy questions, Michelle said. Hi, Denise. Let's see, can you unmute there?
Am I unmuted?
Yep, great.
Okay, great. Hello, it's nice to see both of you. Um, I don't know how to phrase this, but I'll do my best. I've been trying to work with the concept of right speech. So, like, I can babble. Let's hope I don't, demonstrate that now. I can babble, and then when I get anxious, I can have um, talk more and more and more. And so I've been trying to work with right speech, but then also like even in my thinking too. The problem is some really frustrating things happen, or things that quite I see as unjust or make me anxious. And so I can recognize usually soon after the point, and it's definitely an intention I've been really working with. And I definitely try to speak mostly from the heart, and then also try to forgive myself for not always practicing in that way. But that's just something I notice I get really caught in this loop in my head of right speech. Because even though I try to go in, without any judgments and just that's, with ease, of course, all I can hear is that's wrong. That's wrong. If I'm being honest. So yeah, any thoughts on that? Just I would like to step out of the loop. Essentially, I don't want what's here.
You don't what?
I don't want what's here.
Right,
I get
yes,
that. I
right,
get
right.
that.
Okay, I do have a question to clarify. Just um, do you, when you're the things that you're seeing things you don't like that feel unjust, are you referring, and it could be to both, like kind of internally, you're seeing like patterns that you don't like when you're trying to kind of control yourself in that way, or that you're saying that you see things externally and there seems to be the unjust, and so that you feel the need to kind of speak on them. Is it both that you're sort of seeing your own patterns internally that are feel oppressive and externally, or just to clarify?
Yeah, I would say it's both. I try to make sure I do it all. No, if I'm, anyways, it's the own judgments, but then also seeing things that are unjust and then becoming anxious because trying to figure out how to navigate that when there are really difficult dynamics and trying to speak for, anyways, as you can see, I can get caught up in my words. Yeah, so I think
Yeah,
it's
I
both.
think it's very clear. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Michelle,
I have, yeah,
yeah,
I can start. Go ahead, you start. Yeah,
yeah,
I have kind of
go for it.
I don't think this is going to be helpful at all, but it's kind of funny. Um, we have these ground birds here on the Big Island. They're called francolins, and they make a lot of often unwanted sound. Like they screech a lot, and they're screeching at each other. One time I was on the phone with my sister and she was like, "What is that?" And she's like, "I could never live there." And I'm like, I was like, you get so used to it, but it's very intense. And sometimes over the years when I've been on self-retreat, I hear them saying things. Like I actually hear what I'm not trying to think it out. It just starts happening. And this retreat, it was amazing. Um, I kept hearing them saying, to me, "You're exactly right." But it's you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And I kept thinking, wow, this is great. I love hearing that. And the whole retreat. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And I think that there's some level where when we attempt right speech, that there is an underlying wish that we're exactly right. That's why I'm bringing it up. Like it really felt good to, to hear it so exteriorized, and it was so much fun. Like really, I think whenever I hear them now, even if I don't hear that, I still think it. Oh, I'm exactly right. I'm exactly right. Um, so there is a way that our conditioning is to be very casual with our speech. Like
Mhm.
it's very rare that anyone will have a conditioning to be very quiet and very considered with everything they're saying in informal and informal situations. It's just for most people, it's a very hard place to bring the kind of compassion and wisdom you're describing. So just to know that often it takes a lot of forgiveness on for all of us on all levels, like not just
Mhm.
ourselves but others. It's just um, we didn't get a lot of training
Mhm.
in it. That's an understatement. So I think that often there's an underlying sense of like we don't trust, like when you describe the anxiety, for example, um, because we don't have a lot of training, we don't know exactly what the result of our effort is going to be with our speech. And I think that's where, with everything that we do, it's like we often think that if we're going to make this effort, that we should get the result that we want of our effort. But I would say that with speech, it's probably the most unpredictable, because human beings are unpredictable and they're changing, and they're not going to be the same that they were 2 days ago or 5 days ago or 10 days from now. It's being able to, it takes all of our wisdom to know that we never know what's going to happen. We never know what somebody's going to say back. That's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we fall back into these ricocheting patterns, rather than kind of, taking the time to be quiet in between what we're saying. And I think the babbling that I'm quite good at, it's just, it's a way to fill in the space when we're not trusting.
Mhm.
It's like trusting the quiet in regard to speech going back and forth. And for whatever reason, something's unpleasant, something's pleasant, something uh, wanting to be heard, wanting to understand someone else, but not. Boy, it's just, it's hard to speak of it in terms of one particular aspect. maybe Jesse, you can go into one aspect of what I'm saying, because on the whole, I think it takes all of our skill, like all of our spiritual skill, all of the Brahma Viharas, all of the wisdom to really want to connect with somebody with what really they are saying versus what we would like them to be saying.
Mm.
So being with the nature of how things are, um, and the unpredictability of human beings, never mind the unpredictability of our own thought process, right?
Mhm.
It just takes so much willingness to be imperfect, willingness to how would I say that? Correct what we say. I actually end up doing that a lot on text messages. Like what I meant to say, was blah, blah, blah. Because it's so easy to misinterpret.
Mhm.
Texts are, there's probably new media that I don't know about, but tends to be much faster than email. And it's like blah, 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 and then it's like, wow, that really, that really was misunderstood, right?
Yeah.
And underneath it all, oh, the happy Sayadaw in Burma, that great Sayadaw down the river. Um, Someone asked him once if he ever got angry, and he said, "Yes, I get angry when I feel misunderstood." And then I note it, and I'm not angry anymore. But you can see that often in a lot of our
Yeah.
speech and communication. So much of it is about projecting and ricocheting off that projection and being misunderstood.
I can relate to that because I think the worry about being misunderstood is also causing harm to someone else unintentionally. I think that's where I can really, and also to myself, but yeah. So thank you. Getting caught up maybe on the result.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
the worry versus quiet and trust, right?
Yeah.
There's that energy field, but often the way you can deal with it is accepting it. So much of it is accepting that that's how we are or how that's happening, and then putting in the clutch, like instead of braking or stepping on the gas, but just pausing. It's a pausing, and that it's okay to be misunderstood.
Mhm.
Okay. You see what I mean? It's all this resistance that keeps happening where if we're being misunderstood, it's like, okay, it's okay, it's okay. Is it worth attempting to make it clearer?
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not, I really have to say, I think it's the hardest place to feel like one's making a lot of headway, but it's worth the
Yeah.
effort. It's worth the effort because that feeling of alienation or disconnect versus feeling connected, even if it's not perfect, makes a big difference in how we're walking and being on this earth.
Mhm. Thank you.
Jesse?
Yeah, I think I have a couple things like add. Um, First, I think there is something to just be said about the basic tension. I think at the sort of in the question as you asked it on like, or that I feel of I don't think I know that I don't know the sort of text and the commentarial sort of stuff in detail in terms of the canon about right speech. But I will say that what tends to be emphasized is speech that is like really harmful, right?
Mhm.
Hateful speech
Yes.
um, that is intended to make people feel bad or harm them, right? Or deceitful speech that is deceitful. Um, So that doesn't mean that what you're saying doesn't still fall into the realm of right speech, but just to be clear that you're still talking at a more subtle, refined dimension of right speech than tends
Mhm.
to be emphasized, right? Like you're not you're talking about I mean of the sort of perhaps different layers. The primary thing that I heard, and you can correct me if it doesn't feel right, is that your own emotional experience is impacting the way you're communicating in a way that you basically don't like, right? That you think is not as careful as it could be, not well received as it could be, somewhat maybe embarrassing, right? That you don't like this like what kind of what feels is revealed in terms of your personality is something that you have a hard time with. Does that sound sort of uh, what you're part of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's my internal experience. I don't know if that's other people's experiences of me
Right.
because I get good feedback, but even still.
Yeah, right. So there's
Yeah.
doubt, and then kind of the stuff Michelle like. There's all kinds of so I want to differentiate a little bit between speech, right speech, and the concern around it, around like hurting people and lying to them, and what you're talking about, which definitely, you're right that it still falls into that sense of like you want to be careful with how you're communicating and the impact that that has externally and internally. But you're riding that line of the place where it is there's identification, ha ha ha,
Mhm,
of
mhm,
course, right, with what is presented and the quality of
mhm,
character and the personality things that come through and the all of the fear of rejection or self-rejection or self-judgment or all of that, and that can be easily masked as a concern with right speech when really it's we just don't like ourselves, you know what I mean, or we
yeah,
want to be a different person, we want to be someone we're not.
yeah, yeah.
And so I think just to and I know you already know that. That's why you're sort of you're trying to kind of tease those things out. And I guess I'll just say I think that's a valid it's a good thing to distinguish, right? Of speech that is harmful, speech that is destructive on some way. And yes, this question of where is speech um, effective, right? That is part of the right speech concern, right? Where is the way I'm talking about this going to be communicate and express what I want in a way that is received, you know. But I think that sense of like not liking our own personalities and the limits of them or the embarrassment around it or the wishing we were different is just a different realm of something that you have to attend to with different tools, right? It's not the tools of self-management and regulation. It's the tools of like compassion and renunciation, and to some degree, yeah, non-identification, and these tools that come up with it, because just when you're in a group, there just are different personalities, and
Mm,
sometimes there was like a group dynamics. There were a couple different sort of trainings I took back when I was doing more sort of like facilitation work, but there's something about like this understanding that I'm not going to say it well. We're all holding something for the group, right? And that our expressions and our perspectives and our opinions and our manner is, if you look at it in the whole of a group, that it's providing a balance to other people. And that if you look at a whole group, that there tends to be a need. You need different types. You need different types of people and different ways of expressing and different personalities and, different backgrounds and different ways that people interpret things. That makes a system richer if the system can accommodate it. And of course, there is a kind of fascistic tendency of many systems to be like, no, this is how we're going to operate. This is the dominant way. This is the way. And then everyone else gets sort of put on the margins, right? If you don't fit into that mold. But part of it is not going to be just your own work, right? There is also the sense of, well, when you're in groups, what are the group understandings? What are the group agreements about different ways of communicating, right? And the responsibility a group has to hold difference and to say, well, this person's very quiet, and that's like actually like really that there's something amazing there. But when they speak, it's very well, who knows, but also the sense of like sometimes we're going to carve out time to make sure that the people who are not speaking are being heard, right? Because there's often
Mhm.
something there that's helpful to the group. And you have people who are speaking more, who feel much more ease, and you have all kinds of dynamics. But just to the thought, I'll just say for now, this thought that like what you're adding is an important contribution. Not the totality. If any of us, if everyone was talking like any of us talk, it might be awful, right? But that like somehow what you're doing is part of a contribution to what's happening. And maybe it can get out of balance, right? Like any of
Mhm.
us could. But that to not think that the personality or the tendency is inherently toxic or bad.
Mhm.
In fact, that there are going to be sometimes dynamics in a group that cause you to be more like that, right? That cause the tension arises or whatever, and so that you're the place where maybe it pops first, or some things like that happen. I mean, it's all very complex when you're dealing with kind of group dynamics, but mostly it's just sort of to be like the sense of like your voice is valuable. There's a way that you talk, there's a way that you present that has its beauty and its gifts. And yes, of course, there are times where all of us want to be able to be more careful and should be actively working on how we're holding space, how we're taking space, what
Mhm.
we're sharing from, wanting to not just be sharing from anxiety, but from concern, and that those things can be different or whatever. So
Mhm.
the process of development is like, I think, yes, all of us have that responsibility to be careful about overly conflating it with like insecurity about one's personality and how it comes across in the way we speak.
Mhm. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's super
Thank you.
important. We
It's
just
a, it's,
watched this. Oh,
you
God,
go
I
ahead.
just want to say this thing about this David Attenborough documentary about gorillas,
Yeah.
and it's like, wow. And I'm reading this book about the history of like Proto-Indo-European languages. Anyway, you look at these gorillas, and it's like, wow. You look at their eyes, and you, it's unfathomable. Like, what's going on? Something is going on in there, and it's so thoughtful, right? It feels so profound, and yet they're not thinking in language as we interpret it, right? And that I think is like a very powerful, and that's true for all animals, or that you look at this consciousness is there and it's real and it's distinct from ours. But in particular with primates, you're like, it's really something feels very similar. And yet there's no language as we in the same way as in this sort of systematized thing. And so what is that experience about being very thoughtful and thinking about something without language?
Mhm.
And I think we are still capable of that. And it's different, maybe even than mindfulness and the kind of formal contemplative practice that we have. I think that there is like some way that we can explore what it means to think outside of language. and my last thing I'll say is because I do think a lot of times the tendency to I don't want to use the word you use, like to be very more effusive with language, right? And to kind of like and meander and find our way is because sometimes it is that the thinking there's certain people who thinking has to happen out loud. It's just easier to get somewhere by thinking by talking it out versus the sort of internal process that others are kind of going through, I mean, that's only one dynamic, but I do think that's important to recognize in any group that there are just those people who are sitting there like, and it's all kind of like happening sort of in the background or whatever. And then those who really think by talking, and that there's something actually amazing about learning to appreciate that and valuing that and kind of watching that process externally as well. So
Mhm.
anyway, it's another sort of group thing. But yeah. Michelle, I know you were going to say a little more.
No, there were two things. One is just to emphasize again, no matter what our intention and our motivation when we speak, you really can't control how somebody else is going to hear it, right? And so that's vulnerable. It's just vulnerable with our basic human speech. And I really have learned a lot from our mother, Kat, who's sick right now, and she's over 15 years old now. But one thing is that it's taken her so long to have a certain kind of trust, and it's only in this year that she's tried to speak, not human words, yeah, but it's amazing to see her um, go from a feral cat to she'll look at me in a way that's like how I look at her. Do you know what it's like it's more like she's getting so interested. She's getting interested in communicating on a more human level. And it's so powerful that in the situation that's difficult where she's supposed to be having these antibiotics because she needs them, but she doesn't trust the smell of it in her food. And I feel like I've turned myself into a pretzel. Like I'm actually like, I've tried so many things. And what happens is it's always the first thing I try, she'll try and she'll do it. And then I'll think we're on it. This has been going on for 2 weeks. And then the next time she won't touch it. And the way she approaches it, see, that's why I like what Jesse's saying about basically body language, because she has to go up these steps and she gives me this stink eye, we call it in Hawaiian, but it's like, I mean, in Hawaii, like it's like she gives me a look of such poisonous disdain before she even smells it, because it's the second time, right? And then she takes about an hour, I exaggerate, to come up the steps. Like she's like dreading that it's going to be what she thinks it is, right? And then she gets up there and she'll smell it and she walks away like, no way, like this is no, we're not compromising at all. And this is like, but I really, really, really want her to take it. So like I'm trying everything and I just wish she could talk, right? I wish she could say, yeah, I think you better just stick with the blah, blah, blah. But what's so interesting is she really wants she really wants to communicate. And most of the time she doesn't she doesn't need human words. Like if I pay attention, she doesn't. And I think that that's the bottom line of what I think Jesse's saying with the gorillas or what we're on the deep level. It's really it takes a kind of reciprocal tension often to to understand being well. But I often find that it's just being with and abiding there without without a agenda or expectation allows for the communication that you sound like you're wanting.
Yeah, that
You know,
fits.
it's like,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm saying. The cat will give me that sense of like just being with. The bottom line is that when she kind of settles down and trusts, there's much more ability to communicate. Or when I settle down and
Yeah.
trust, right? But it's like that. It's like that with all of us. It's so moving, yeah, when we let go of the expectation and the agenda and um, try not to force or push anything and really just make space for what's true in the moment that's always changing. You know, it's why we practice.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Kristen.
Hello,
Hey.
thank you both. I have a question. Samadhi came up last week, I think. And I noticed that, teachers are looking for a way to translate samadhi that isn't sort of concentration. And I had a couple of questions about that because I remember Sister Ayakema talking about how concentration can be wholesome or unwholesome depending on what your motivation is. Like if you're, she used the example of if someone is trying to crack a safe, they have to be very, very concentrated. So I'm just wondering about samadhi and whether samadhi can be both wholesome and unwholesome or used for unwholesome purposes.
That's a great question. Yeah. I mean, we could probably talk for hours about it. So, yeah, I think it's oh. Jesse, do you want to start or do you want me to start? Yeah.
Either way.
Hmm?
I mean, on that basic, there is sometimes, controversy or whatever on any of these points, but there's often the the thing you'll see is like, well, if there's right mindfulness and there's right concentration, right, as part of like the Noble Eightfold Path, then there must be wrong mindfulness and wrong concentration. Now, the Theravadan kind of like lineage and Abhidhamma text put mindfulness in a quality that sort of like is always wholesome, right? And so there's a discrepancy there, I'm not sure about samadhi, but essentially I think there's an understanding amongst outside of perhaps like the extreme orthodoxy that they're concentration, like you said, you can concentrate on something unwholesome, I think, you know, but there are other elements that make up concentration in terms of like aiming, sustaining, and sort of breaking those things down, that all of those, can be considered unwholesome. And yet there is something about the deeper kind of unification of mind, or the, I can't remember, Steve would sometimes like you say, he would like to talk, try to use different language around it, right? That does tend to lead towards very beautiful, wholesome mind states, right? In terms of talking the jhanic factors and kind of uh, some beautiful qualities of mind. So, I'd say there's probably arguments on either side of that. I know it's a very I'll stop there just because I'm sure we'll go into more kind of depth with it, but I do think that it's a perennial question in the world out there. These types of, is it not considered samadhi if it's unwholesome? And look at all the suttas, or not really the suttas, but the commentarial stuff that talk about how to develop supernormal powers. They're all based on samadhi and concentration. They're all based on it, assuming it as kind of wholesome or states of mind, that can be developed, even if it's just concentrating on like the color blue, which is not particularly, it's the object itself is neutral.
Yeah.
But then there are other, of course, other traditions where people practice sorcery, that's malicious and malevolent. One would assume that would also take concentration, right, to be able to try to assert that sort of psychic power out there. Michelle, what are your...
One of the incredibly, for me, deep appreciations for what I feel like I took and learned from Mahasi Sayadaw. And then, that lineage with Sayadaw Ulakanaru Pandita, or the Happy Sayadaw and Angel Sayadaw. It wasn't like these, or Deepama, yeah. I mean, these people had they had trained themselves a lot in concentration. And it really was only in the service of wisdom, of getting wisdom, of like developing wisdom. And I feel like it's something I so deeply trust. I just feel like it's so safe and it's so pure. So I think it all comes down to motivation. And so the training is to develop just enough concentration. It's just enough to be able to see things, to see the nature of how things are. That, like, we should just, that is a never-ending, vast and deep process with every moment, like being able to be with what is and the nature of how things are is ultimately so hard that we need concentration as an ability to gather the attention so we can see clearly, but also we need to have concentration for rest and solitude. So that, like, that's an anchor, for example, in the Vipassana world, or in Brahma Vihara, you have an easy being. You have a safe harbor, because things as they are, the nature of how things are is constantly changing. So I mean, the longer I live, the more I practice, and the more I see how you can have great wisdom, but if you are using it, if you have the power, enough power of concentration where you start using it as a kind of control, it's dangerous. And that, like, Upandita, at least personally with me, but also being around Mahasi enough, that understanding how seductive it is, power, greed, wanting what we want, that the more you develop that concentration and meditation without much more development of wisdom, it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous. So hence you hear Jesse and I, we emphasize that this is a process of purification and motivation, because that ability to focus the attention, it can be like a laser beam. It can be like the quantum, huge facilities they're building, and like the focus of it is extraordinary. But so what if there's no wisdom? All that power, and we can see it. Look at us on this planet right now, the human being, and how seductive it all is to fall for all this. It's a nightmare. It's so painful, yeah. And you see people get seduced into all this stuff or I see people get seduced into all this stuff with meditation, because it's so much better than being with what is. Heaven forbid we should be interested in our anxiety, right? Or our aging body, or like, like it's just like, oof, or interested in wanting power. So I know there's flaws in every tradition and in every teacher and everything, but I think that my understanding of this is so important in terms of, if push comes to shove, always go for wisdom. And go ahead. I just want to say one more thing. What we're developing in this practice is, if you're whatever you're anchoring with, it's developing the rest from things as they are, the solitude, the leaving all the other objects behind for a while, like the rest, the solitude, the focus. It's all in the service of then being able to have enough power of mind to be with things as they are, to be with pain, pleasure, neutral, right? To just to all that energy goes into being interested in things as they are. And if we need, if we need distraction, of course, concentration is a great way to distract. So I'm not knocking it, but it is something we have to understand. So yeah, Kristen, I just did my thing, but sorry, I really was.
Sorry, I was having a hard time unmuting
Okay,
myself, which is why I was waving. Yeah, I remember way back when I was very grateful to read about access concentration,
right.
because concentration has not been a strong point, but even now, 45 years later. But I do seem to have enough, I just kind of follow myself throughout the day and see what's happening in my mind, particularly the proliferating thoughts of whatever. And, I just see them lessening and lessening and lessening. And also, you're continuing to emphasize being in relationship with everything. And yeah. So that's, and of course, non-identification. So that's mostly what my practice is about. I mean, I do have a sitting or a lying down practice, but as my health declines, I'm falling asleep more. Uh, so it's more of a moment to moment practice during the day.
Moment to moment of practice takes concentration. It takes that momentary concentration. And that's what's so important and beautiful and enlightening.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Obviously, there's so much to say about it.
I do want to, it's like that faith, Kristen, which is a large part of what you're expressing. It's just it's of the most important things, right? The faith in your actual direct concrete experience and the relationship with that is what will keep us moving towards awakening, and is not about getting rid of it. It is not about finding some cave in the mind outside of that. Again, as Michelle said, there's always caveats. There's something important about getting some space at times, and yet how many teachings out there are really just concentration under the disguise of wisdom, right? And for us, this is like the test. It's like, is it based on relationship with our direct experience, or is it about cultivating some far out thing where you're totally distant from everything, everything is out of control, you're ignoring it, you're not in relationship with it, and that's how you know, and learn to trust it and learn to be discerning, between, you know, a lot out there that sounds very amazing and compelling and wow, like, because in part the power that Michelle is talking about, there is a power the mind is capable of, that's amazing, and an aspect of that is necessary in order to pierce through delusion, right? But only if it's in service of that. And just you almost cannot overstate how seductive it is and how confused people can get about the relationship between power and wisdom. And so it's just that encouragement, that it's always trying to be discerning about whatever you're hearing from us, from others. It's like, what's really going on? What is the practice in and of itself really doing? And learning to more and more trust our own way forward, and thankfully, are the teachings that really do insist upon this, in our lineage, and it feels like a great protection. Yeah. So, Kristen, thanks for asking, and Michelle, yeah, thank you for that. Felt very clear. Rose.
Hi everyone, how's it going? It's good to say hello. It's been a while since I've talked. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like I've told William this a million times, but I have this dangling conversation that I feel like didn't occur between me, Jake, and Steven, or one or the other. And it had to do with this question of concentration that you're going over right now, right? So Steve gave some kind of instructions, something along the lines of what do you do when you're having a hard time? And whatever the mindfulness skills are of those, he was like, go to what's most accessible. So what did I do? I mean, I was probably just restless. It wasn't anything big deal. I needed to use some jhana coping skill. And so I followed the Lee Brasington instructions, dropped into my, let's call it jhana, whatever. I was concentrated. And I went into a group interview and I told Jake that, it was funny because it's 6:30 in the morning and I didn't want my coffee anymore. All the desire went away, right? And I thought it was kind of funny, but here we are. I was concentrated. The room was really quiet. It just felt like there was zero distance between me and another person. I felt like there was no idea that was separating me. There was zero problem. Me, social anxiety, it was not there in the usual sense, right? And I went in and I was talking to Jake in the interview about it, didn't want my coffee. And I basically said, well, he said, I don't know who said what first, but I basically said, you can have insight in those kind of states. And because he was like, stop, right? The mind likes being there. And I was too confused because I just wasn't articulate. And obviously I've had a few years to keep thinking about this over and over again. And so my insight, I know my insight was this is all an embellishment, right? But I couldn't articulate it. And then he sent me to Steven probably for my interview. And by that time I was a discombobulated, nervous mess because I thought the instructions were don't do the jhanas, your mind, you just kind of went on a vacation for nothing, right? But the thing is, how could you actually really be concentrated unless the mindfulness was there anyway? So I know I was mentally noting. I know I was oh, it's like this, it's like that, it's like this. And I knew I was seeing some kind of something, So the wisdom is there. I've never, not saying what I was doing was a perfect jhana, but I can't understand it to actually have samadhi without mindfulness there at the same time. And it's just the mind is on the quieter end of the spectrum of the dance of it or something. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have my journal from the retreat in front of me.
That's a great
But I think
It's very clear. Yeah.
you can have mindfulness whenever. I can even have it in dreams. You're noting, right?
For sure.
You're kind of seeing things, right? Yeah, something. So.
I mean, I'm sure we both will have a little bit. And Rose, I'm going to mute you just because there's a
Oh, I'll turn it off.
hum
Sorry,
there?
it's my dehumidifier.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know, Michelle, do you?
Well, I think again, we want to take great care with this question, Rose, because it's our spiritual experience is so deep and poignant and vulnerable. I like the way I like to approach any experience that happens for us is sometimes this kind of a kind of deep concentration a shift will happen when we're practicing. And we didn't even do what you said. Like, you know how you said you kind of shifted to that Lee Brasington method, right? There was an intention, there was a shift, but sometimes something will just come up and you're deeply concentrated um, for no apparent reason. And I don't believe in just shoving them away and saying, well, no, no. It's like all of this is very interesting to consider. But what is usually true when the mind is absorbed completely, which is there's aspects of jhana. So if it's absorbed completely in that moment or those moments, you will not have insight. But what you have to be very careful about is that, say that's 10 moments, and then like you weren't doing deep absorption practice, so that you could be that maybe that was like that for 10 minutes and then or 5 minutes or 2 seconds or like you're going in and out of it. Do you see what I mean? It's not ever this way of relating to things so that it's not also transitory. Everything is transitory. So I just did a self retreat. I had an experience of like this whopper concentration just appears. And of course you like it. It's awesome. And I explore, it's like there's a place where there'll be the mindfulness and exploration will explore it, and then it can go back in, explore it, go back in. Do you see what I mean? It's not, I don't believe in analyzing these places when you're in them because it just ends it. So mindfulness is different than analyzing. So I don't know if that's helpful because I think that what happens is if you make these distinctions too linear and too black and white, like then you lose something. You lose something. You were having a very powerful experience, and to me, that is what is to be explored. That sense of I forget what you called it, but that kind of feeling of self-awareness in a group that disappeared, right? That's awesome, right? That's something to explore. Like what was that? And that sense of duality that disappeared, that will often happen when there's enough concentration as well as mindfulness, right? Like there's so if you took a day of practice, you could never even ever talk about it enough or get the whole picture. There's so much, the mind is vast, deep, vast. And so I think this is a really good question. But I like to be careful of not pouncing on it, and trying to make it, well, this was jhana, this was not, because it sounds more like you would come in it and out of you come in it and then observe it. You're in it, you observe it. That's not that's technically not jhana. Like, it's not, sorry, it's Vipassana jhana. You can have Vipassana jhana. And I have a feeling that what happened is that the method you jumped into kicked you into more of a Vipassana jhana. Now that might bring up more questions. I hope it brings up more questions, because when you go into the strict concentration practice where you're taking these resolutions to get totally absorbed, you're not supposed to be mindful of it. And then you take a resolve to come out of it, and when you're coming out of it, you're mindful of it. But I'm not negating that I think you went into it and came out of it, maybe was coming in and out of it if you were having insight. And that's very bona fide. It's very, perhaps, I'm not even saying I'm right. So I think it's great. I just wish that I wish you didn't feel so discombobulated by it, because that might have been unpleasant, but I think it's really important to get it clear and to keep asking about it.
I actually enjoyed speaking to Stephen in a discombobulated way because he really anchored me.
That's great. That's great.
I was like, I'm going up, I'm going down, I'm going. He's like, you're having an intense experience, and he just pulled me right back into the moment. So I ended up getting really good teachings out of that.
That's great.
But yeah, and then I guess the grief, I just feel like I also have this. Well, I'm back to the point where wherever I was, jhana or not, I still can't envision samadhi without mindfulness, like having some kind of awareness or dropping through, without it. But that's just, who knows, maybe give me X amount of time and I'll have a different answer.
No, but it's kind of like the last question. It is also a place of contention for like a couple thousand years, so don't worry about that it's not totally clear or that you're not totally resolved on it, because people have come down in different places with that. I mean, even in our relatively coherent lineage, never mind the expansiveness of it. I think in some ways maybe it's reiterating what Michele says, but just to say it's such a good example and poignant. I think maybe I'll say at the beginning, it's like it's hard to hear that this has been for 4 years or something. You haven't been able to address this with anyone, and that's painful for me to hear. And we would prefer to not have to wait that long to feel like something like this is, especially since it's still alive and it's still obviously like bringing up material for you. It's such a good example of the reality of where we're all gonna, we have our own experiences. We try to put them into words. The first question of, it's like we try to communicate something that is literally beyond words, that has nothing to do with words. We try to fit into these things in all of our ways that are hard to hear. And then the teacher is there, who knows what kind of day they had, who knows what all kinds of the imperfections that we will abide in and manifest. And there's just something that doesn't feel like it fully goes right, or it doesn't get resolved in that moment. And it's just a good reminder of that, kind of what Michele said at some point there, of like, just, you ultimately have to get that no one is ever going to understand your practice like you do. And teachers are so important, and texts are so important, and teachings are important, and all of this. And then there's also something about like, it's just so personal, and you should never relinquish some aspect of that, right? Of just believing anyone's take on what you're saying. It doesn't mean you shouldn't receive it and listen to it and bring it into the context, but the sense that you stuck at years later are like, you still feel a sense of confidence that something really good and wholesome was happening there. And that's really powerful and really beautiful. And to not let go of that, just because it wasn't perhaps like recognized or seen or interpreted in a way that, and then reframe back to you in a way that you were able to hear. I mean, I definitely will say that, Steve and Jake and Michelle's training with Upanita, the what qualifies as jhana is very particular. It's very clear, and that it is a different understanding than Lee Brasington has. Just like period, it's a different framework, and it's related, and there's a lot of resonance. But we just know, and I don't even know what Lee's method and sort of thing it really is, and I came on, but it's just like a different way. It's a different understanding, and so just in that is going to be a complex thing to manage in terms of interview, in terms of sort of like adjusting frameworks to sort of understand and like who's right and who's not. And the most important thing is what Michelle is saying, which is to say there is this, and what you're saying, there's an amazing, unbelievable, mysterious, profound relationship between concentration and mindfulness. We've seen samadhi and wisdom, and the exploration is like amazing and confusing and clarifying and bewildering and all of these things. And the good fortune to have 5 minutes in a lifetime where you feel like you dropped in or quiet is like unbelievable good fortune, that even ever happens once in a lifetime. And then of course to feel like, oh, it's not that, to feel like that gets kind of shut down is hard. And any of us who are yogis have always had 100% interviews where the teacher is sobering in their response to to what we are excited about, and that's part of the practice and part of the relationship, and not being, but I think what you're describing as like, you're trusting that you want to learn more, you've had a very powerful experience, and Michelle is offering one way or a few ways actually that might really is happening, right? Which is that like that level of absorption is something that we're moving in and out of, right? That kind of drops in and out of way. And when we talk about mind moments of being tens of thousands in a second or hundreds of thousands in a second, then you're like the sense of this is what happened versus, well, in the subtle level, there's a million things that are happening that allows for a kind of texture of engrossment and mindfulness, and a really different perspective on space and on time and on, what's happening internally and all of those things. It's very powerful, and sometimes we get clues later on in our practice of like, oh, this happened again, and now I know what that thing was. And other times we just move on to other material, and it all sort of creates a kind of composite of all these different mind states that we can explore and find our way through. But
It's
it's
okay.
very
I
powerful.
haven't been struggling for like 4 years. I don't want you to think I'm like sitting here.
Okay.
Like I talked to William about all my deranged thinking thoughts, but like I've gone over like that with him. Um, I'm more sad, more like a little kid that I couldn't go back to Jake and Steven
Mm,
after and be like, I've been chewing on this more and I've been thinking about it. I think that's the pain point
of
is the
course,
grief.
yeah.
That's the only thing that hurts. Like I feel like talking to both of them was helpful in its own way. And like sometimes I would even see Steve like responding to people in the Q&A a little bit like crispy about the jhanas. Like sometimes he got like a little prickly and like I feel like the messages were sometimes mixed, but I feel like that's probably inevitable to like each moment being, doing the best he can and like what's needed. But like in their own ways, they were really, really helpful. Yeah.
Great, great.
Yeah. Thank
I,
you.
I do want to add one more thing to this, and it would take longer to explain it, but I am so glad that I didn't run into Sayadaw U Pandita until I did 10 years of formal practice before, and I'd done a lot of my own, just on my own natural practice before that. But I think there's a way in which I would just like to say for everybody again that if one is trying to analyze one's practice too much, I'm doing it kinesthetically because it's like the attention comes up into the head and looks versus like is dropped in to the experience. And it just, anytime you cannot do that is good. Like anytime you can just go with the flow of what's happening and whatever it is, go with it, because that never lasts long enough. It just never, it's like it just never does. So you go with that. And when I first started practicing with U Pandita, I did not understand the difference between concentration and mindfulness. And he, instead of like using an analytical way of words to try to help me understand it, he used behavior modification. And so when I would come in for an interview and I would say what was happening, he would mostly just be disgusted, like because I was getting absorbed sometimes, but he didn't explain it. He would just not be very nice. And so it took me a long time to get it, but it was like this, it would be like with a sound, like with, I'm trying to explain it and not take too long, but say with a sound, like any sound, and that's happened for years. This would happen for years, that like, I'm just giving a little example. With a sound, it can be with the breath, it can be with any moment, but if you're connecting and sustaining the attention, that's concentration with what's appearing. Vipassana mindfulness is being able to synchronize the attention with it and ride it. That's just concentration. But then mindfulness is actually knowing the nature of what's appearing and noticing it disappear. That's mindfulness. And so sometimes I would be riding the sound and even being aware of it disappear, but I wasn't noticing the nature of it, and he'd attack. And that's how I learned what I'm talking about, and it was very difficult to learn it that way, but it got very clear. And I did not, the point is, if I was writing it and not seeing the nature of it, I didn't jump up into an analytical mode and say, that's not right. You just do it. You just go for the ride. And then you start understanding what mindfulness is and what concentration is. And sometimes mindfulness and concentration comes together. That's Vipassana. But you're not, in my opinion, trying to control this is insane. Why would you control it? You can't, but you can learn. You keep learning and learning and learning. You can't command mindfulness. You can't even command concentration, but you have to have the concentration to have to have the mindfulness. You have to have connecting, sustaining to have the mindfulness. So if push comes to shove, I'm not going to be upset that I don't have the mindfulness. Why would I? You're still there. It's not like you're lost in some like aversion nightmare, right? Like it's not like you're like sleep. So this is the crux of it, really, is to keep allowing how it's happening and keep showing up for it and learning. I hope that's clear. I tried to do it by 4 o'clock. Oh, 4 o'clock our time.
No, thanks so much. Nice to say hi to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Rose. Yeah.
Thank you, Rose. Ah, great. Really great, everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting ready for the retreat in a couple of weeks, so that's good. Everyone's sharpening their tools.
And
So
so much metta, so much
yeah,
metta, so much metta. When push comes to shove, some metta really helps. Lots of it. Compassion. Peace.
take care, everyone. See you soon.